there were too many journalists as well? Was journalism a popular program back in the day when you studied?
I think people like the idea, but I think the people who actually finish the career, I think it's 1% that actually end up working in a newspaper. The rest normally go into public relations, communications.
Right. Yeah, because they got the language skills, so they got.
But it's funny. I speak to a lot of people here in Chile, and they say I'm a journalist, and I say, well, what newspaper? And they say, no, I don't work in a newspaper. I work in Falabella or something like that, or Ripley.
Right.
To me, that's not journalism at all.
Exactly.
That's
so
public relations. So they're actually working in an office. I mean, they're working in public relations. They're writing the press releases for the company.
Oh, okay.
And they consider that journalism.
Yeah, it's definitely not journalism, but it's at least they're putting their skills to work, which is basically their writing skills and their people skills.
That's true. But when they say they're a journalist, as an ex-journalist, you
immediately exactly, you have a different picture in your head.
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking a journalist is an investigative reporter that works in in either a newspaper, the radio, or
right.
Television, really.
Exactly, or you follow a case and you investigate that, very deeply.
I've got nothing against, obviously, people who work in public relations, communications.
Right.
Not at all, but if you work in that field, I think, you have to recognize that is public relations or communications, not actually journalism.
Yeah, it's much better to say, I studied journalism, but now work in public relations.
Yeah, I think that's being more honest with yourself and with other people.
Right. So that's what you did in Australia before coming to Chile, am I right?
That's correct. Yeah, I eventually, after starting in Bundaberg, the Bundaberg Newsmail as a sports reporter, I then got another job in the Cairns Post as a general news reporter.
Okay.
So I moved from sports to general news, which I liked even more because it was more exciting and
right. A lot more cases to work on.
Yeah, more challenging, really. I mean, sports reporting is great, but it's not really challenging because it's always the same thing.
Exactly. Anything you do within only one discipline or field, it gets kind of boring because it's always the same vocab, I guess, same lines, same writing.
Exactly.
I've been experiencing that with my posts. If I write like a police car accident report or something like that, it's always going to be the same. Some people died, some people were injured. Initial police reports say this, say that. It's the same thing, so it gets kind of boring, which is why you want to go into culture. You want to explore different subjects as well.
I think you got to do what you enjoy. I mean, if you love sports reporting, then that's what you got to do. If you love reporting on crimes or weather or politics, and you really just got to find what you enjoy doing and do that. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
I guess it really gets exciting when you meet people and you talk to them like in the flesh, like you were doing, like you were talking to the stars right there, like the big players.
Yeah, well, I mean, my newspaper wasn't the Cairns Post is not a huge newspaper. It's owned by a big news company. It's in the north of Australia. It's actually where the Great Barrier Reef is. That's the Cairns is where the Great Barrier Reef is. It's great because you have such beautiful nature there. But
right. But
I wasn't exactly interviewing like A-list celebrities or...
Yeah, but still gave you access to players and different people in the sports.
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, you always have access to all events and things like that.
Okay. So what brought you to Chile? What brought you here?
Well, in 2010, I was around 24, and I was working as a journalist in my second newspaper, and I had big dreams of becoming this world-renowned, famous journalist working in, I don't know, maybe for Fox News or CNN, traveling the world. That was my goal, I was really working hard towards that.
Right. Do you think that's a difficult thing to get, or there are actually times when they're recruiting and they might just, knock on your door and say, hey, we know you're a journalist, we know that you're into sports, and we would just like to have like a local journalist that would report for CNN here in Australia. Is that something difficult to happen, or it is something that could actually become a reality?
I think it happens when you need to be good.
Right.
You need to be a good journalist and you need to have exposure. Your stories need to be read. I mean, because the Cairns Post was owned by Fox News.
Right.
I mean, it's owned by, I think the company's called, what's the company called? It's a very big media company that's part of the Fox News kind of.
Yeah, okay.
company. It's Rupert Murdoch. He's the owner. He's a billionaire, Australian billionaire guy.
Right.
News Media or something like that. News Corp, I think, is the name of the company. But they have a lot of newspapers in Australia. So if you write a good story, that story can then be picked up by other newspapers online. So you can get your story published in Sydney and Melbourne and all the big newspapers. So I was lucky because I was able to get my work kind of picked up by these other big newspapers in the city, and I get exposure like that. So, I mean, if you're good and you get exposure, I mean, you've got to have a bit of luck, and I suppose it's experience as well. It's a combination of things that can lead you to getting that dream job in, CNN
I was also thinking that you might also get picked or recruited by one of these big news companies if you lived in a very remote area where there are no more journalists or reporters, and like if there's a big thing going on, like a huge earthquake or some big social crisis, and they would need like a local correspondent.
Well, normally for example, in each state you have the one news, you have a newspaper that covers news for all of the state.
That's true.
And then in all this other towns and cities, they have their local newspaper. And normally the big newspaper that covers all of the news in the state also has a regional reporter that works for them to cover those areas, the smaller areas.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, for example, you might have, when you see a story in El Mercurio,
right,
that's covering a topic, I don't know, in Chile or Temuco or something. Probably the newspaper El Mercurio has a regional reporter that works for them that covers that area. Mm-hmm. And that's the same in Australia.
Right. Yeah, okay. So, I was thinking, for example, like, a couple of years back, we had this big mining crisis. We had like 33 people trapped under a mine. And obviously, when they set up this whole rescue operation, I know that some BBC news correspondent came to Chile, or at least on the news, I saw that the BBC was reporting about the 33 miners trapped in Chile.
Yeah.
So I was thinking more along those lines, like if they don't have anybody in a far away place or a remote area, would they send a correspondent there? Would they send a reporter there?
They do that, and they also there are a lot of freelance journalists that work independently and offer their services. They might offer to cover a story and charge for that story, privately, just between them and the company. So they do have correspondents that work exclusively for the network, and they also use a lot of freelance journalists that may be living there in the area.
Right, that makes more sense, I think, because like if you don't have like a lot of big events to cover in a certain remote area, it wouldn't make sense to have like a full-time journalist, ready for the action there.
Well, that's really what happens. That's why they have these freelance guys, because there's always guys who are living in other countries that offer their stories to different networks.
Okay, so to go back to my initial question, what brought you down to Chile? You said you had big dreams of becoming a world-renowned journalist.
I had these big ambitions, but I also really wanted to travel. I traveled a lot while I was working as a journalist. I used, for 2 or 3 weeks, I used to go to different countries, and I really loved traveling, and I always wanted to backpack.
Right. Pretty adventurous guy, huh?
Yeah, I always wanted to kind of get lost in the world and just forget about my career and forget about, just kind of enjoy life and just not worry about careers and money. And so I had really contradictory feelings, and one side of me wanted to be this big hotshot journalist, and then this other side of me wanted to just travel the world and just kind of be nobody, just lost.
Kind of be free, no shackles, no responsibilities, like just travel around and get to know the world.
That's right, and eventually I succumbed to that side of me that wanted to, to do to have that experience. So I decided to quit my job.
Right.
And I initially got a visa to go to England. Mm-hmm. Work visa for 2 years, and my idea was to be a freelance reporter around Europe.
Right.
But I remember one day I was in my apartment, and I had a kind of world map on my wall.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I was looking at South America, and I just thought, South America is, well, first of all, it's a lot cheaper than Europe.
Right.
I think it offers a lot more adventure for a younger person.
That's true, and geographically speaking, it's very, very similar to Australia.
So I decided to kind of ditch the idea of going to Europe, and I decided to go to South America, and I kind of sold all my belongings, my car, my bike. I put, a lot of things in a backpack, and I brought my recorder and some notepads, because my idea was to be a freelance reporter in South America, and I was about 24 at the time. This was October 22,
so
2010.
Let me get this straight. First, you traveled to England. You were there for some time, and then you decided...
No. I got the visa to go to England, but then I actually cancelled that. I actually changed my plans after I got my visa.
I understand.
I never bought any tickets, though, to go to England, but that was the original plan.
Okay, I see. I guess South America had more of an appeal to you.
Much more.
Okay.
Much more.
Good.
So there I basically bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires in October 22, 2010. My parents were really worried because obviously, I was doing really well in their eyes, working and making money and having a good career. And then now I've got a one-way ticket to South America, and I've sold all my things. They were pretty worried, but I think they thought that I had to do this, and then I would come back to my senses and return and pick up from where I left off. But
right, which hasn't happened yet.
No, it hasn't.
You're still trying to come back to your senses.
I have found a new life here, and
I understand. Have they ever been here? I mean, do you miss your parents? Do you have any brothers, sisters?
I have two sisters. All my family lives in Australia, obviously. They have been here 3 times.
Right, that's cool.
And I've been back a couple of times as well, and we're actually going back in March.
Right. Has the baby been there?
No, because the baby was born October last year. So.
Right, I understand. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So, do you ever miss your family being in Chile now?
Well, I have my family. That is my wife and my son. That's my...
Right, your own flesh and blood.
That's my direct or intimate family. My mother, my father, my 2 sisters. Yes, I miss them, but I think it's never been that hard for me to be away from my family. I don't know if that makes me a cold person but I don't know. It's never been... Because I left home when I was 21 to work in... to pursue my career. So it's never been a difficult thing to be far from my family.
Yeah, and
I miss them, yes, but I can handle it.
Right. Before that, you were totally into sports, so you were living it up. You were not really thinking about your family that much, I guess. You were just being a happy kid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love my family, and I still speak to them quite regularly on Skype and WhatsApp.
Right.
But I don't need a physical contact with them every day or every month.
You're that type of guy. I see exactly where you're coming from. I am kind of similar when it comes to, family relationships. I hardly ever call them unless they're like kind of nagging at me. Hey, why haven't you called me? What's going on? Are you okay?